What happens when your only way out of a dark tunnel forces you to break the very thing you cherish most, your own soul? Is desperation ever a good enough reason to trade true love for cold, glittering gold? When a cry for help is heard by a man of immense wealth, but the solution he offers demands a price far heavier than any diamond. We often see the surface of a difficult choice, but what lies beneath the gilded promise can be a darkness no one ever saw coming. In the sun-baked dust of a small town in Nigeria, under a sky that had seen too much sorrow, the choice was laid bare: marry for salvation or starve with dignity. The stakes were simple, yet devastating. If she said no, her family would be lost to the crushing debts that haunted their doorstep like hungry spirits. If she said yes, she would be lost to the gilded cage of a loveless marriage. This isn't just a story about a desperate bride or a wealthy groom. It's a story about the true cost of survival and the distance between an outward vow and a quiet, internal sacrifice. Before her name became a legend whispered at wedding receptions, there was Grace. A daughter. A protector. A woman on the edge of a painful decision. Welcome to Stories by the King, where every story carries a heartbeat, and every truth demands to be heard. Now, before we begin, where in the world are you watching from? Is it morning in Lagos, evening in Nairobi, or midnight in London? Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Your engagement helps us share more stories that heal and empower. Now, lean in. Because this isn't just about what happened on her wedding night, it's about what it revealed about her whole life. The wedding day was a blur of expensive lace and forced smiles. Grace, dressed in a gown that had cost more than her family's entire village earned in a year, moved through the crowd like a beautiful, silent ghost. She was marrying David, a businessman whose success was legendary and whose reputation for cold efficiency was equally well known. His wealth was the only reason she was there. Her father, a proud man broken by a crippling medical debt, watched from the corner, his eyes pleading for forgiveness with every glance. Grace had agreed to the marriage, not for herself, but for the life-saving surgery her younger brother desperately needed. David's initial offer wasn't a loan or a gift, it was a price. His wife in exchange for the full payment of all family debts and a guarantee of the brother's medical care. Grace's heart was heavy, not with wedding joy, but with the cold, hard bargain she had struck. She had sold her future freedom for her family's present survival, and the weight of that transaction made the gold bangles on her wrists feel like chains. As the ceremony concluded and the last guest departed, the huge, silent mansion became her gilded prison. David, towering and impeccably dressed, led her into the private wing. There was no warmth in his touch, only the possessive grip of a man who knew he had purchased something valuable. He looked at her with an intensity that promised ownership, yet revealed nothing of his own heart. Grace braced herself, her mind a fortress against the intimacy she dreaded. She reminded herself of the hospital bills, of her brother's fragile life, of the promise she had made. The marriage was a contract, a transaction, and she would fulfill her part. She had spent months preparing for this moment, rehearsing the coldness she would need to maintain, the emotional distance required to live a lie. But the closer they got to the master suite, the more her carefully constructed fortress trembled, assaulted by a fear that had nothing to do with her family's debt and everything to do with her own soul. They reached the door to the master suite. David paused, his hand hovering over the golden handle, and Grace's breath caught in her throat. The moment stretched, thick with unspoken tension. He finally pushed the door open, but the room was not what she expected. Instead of a lavish, seductive setting, the room was stark, almost monastic. The only truly noticeable objects were a massive, ancient bookshelf crammed with worn books, and on a simple table, a single, flickering oil lamp. David did not turn on the electric lights, and the room remained shrouded in the soft, mysterious glow of the small flame. This unexpected simplicity, this lack of opulent display, confused Grace. It did not fit the man of excess she had built up in her mind. He was a paradox of the sterile businessman and the hidden scholar. David walked to the window, his back to her, and stood looking out at the sprawling, darkened estate. The silence was deafening, amplified by the heavy velvet drapes and the sheer size of the room. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, measured, and stripped of the usual businessman's bravado. "Grace," he began, still not looking at her. "I know why you married me. And I know the depth of your sacrifice." His words were not a question, but a statement of absolute knowledge. They shattered the fragile peace Grace had constructed. She felt stripped bare, exposed. Her elaborate wedding gown suddenly felt like cheap fabric, and the gold jewelry a meaningless facade. She had expected confrontation, perhaps a cold, transactional proposal. She had not expected this quiet, unnerving acknowledgement of her pain. He finally turned, his face illuminated by the subtle light of the oil lamp. His eyes, though still unreadable, held a trace of profound sorrow. He then did the last thing Grace could have ever imagined. He walked to the center of the room, and instead of taking a step towards her, he dropped to his knees. The wealthy, powerful David, a man who commanded legions of employees and controlled vast sums of money, knelt before her. In his hands, he held not an expensive gift, but a simple, worn leather-bound book. The gesture was a raw, unexpected punch to her gut, confusing the transactional narrative she had prepared for. The true surprise was not the setting, or the words, or even the kneeling, but the fear in his eyes. It was not the fear of a husband, but the raw, visible terror of a man cornered by a lifetime of hidden burdens. David did not look up. He simply held the book and spoke to the floor. "The money for your brother's surgery is already transferred, Grace. Every debt is settled." He paused, his voice cracking, the polished veneer of the powerful CEO utterly gone. "But I have not purchased a wife. I have purchased a witness." He slowly looked up, his eyes now conveying a desperate, silent plea. "Look at this book, Grace. It is my father's journal." On the outside, he was Chief Arthur, a philanthropist, a man of God. Inside, he was a thief who built his empire on the tears and stolen lands of his own people. The simple leather book seemed to pause in his hands, a dark heart beating at the center of his wealth. Grace stood frozen, the shock of his revelation eclipsing the shame of her own transactional marriage. She had come prepared to sleep in a gilded cage, she had instead walked into a mausoleum of hidden sins. He continued, his words a flood of confession that washed away the expectations of their wedding night. "For 10 years, I have tried to make restitution, but every time I get close, the machinery he built closes ranks. My own mother, my uncles, they are all protecting the secret and the fortune built on it. They see me as the rebellious son, the betrayer of the legacy." He explained that he needed a wife who was completely outside of his family's toxic web, a person who had witnessed suffering and understood the real meaning of sacrifice. He needed someone with a motivation so pure, saving a life, that her loyalty would be to truth, not to the family's corrupted wealth. "They would never believe I would risk this empire for the sake of justice. They expect me to act like them, to be greedy and transactional. Your marriage to me, bought with your family's freedom, is the very thing that will make them trust the lie." The realization dawned on Grace with a chilling clarity. Her first marriage, the painful transaction she despised, was merely the first, necessary lie in a much larger, more dangerous truth. David wasn't just a rich man, he was an agent working against his own empire, using his wealth to dismantle the injustice his father had created. Her heart, previously numb with the pain of her sacrifice, began to beat again, but this time with a mixture of terror and a strange, powerful sense of purpose. He wasn't asking her to be his lover, he was asking her to be his ally in a silent war against his own blood. He was offering her a chance to trade her shame for genuine, life-altering impact, but at a risk that could cost them everything. David finally placed the journal on the bed and stood up, stepping back to create distance between them. "I have no claim on you, Grace. This room is yours. My life is yours, too, if you choose to help me. I have taken your freedom, but only to give you a higher purpose, one that will heal 1,000 families, not just your own. But it will be dangerous. If my family suspects, they will destroy us both, and every life we plan to save. He then walked to a second, smaller door on the opposite wall. My room is across the hall. I will not approach you unless you ask me to. For the world, we are husband and wife. But in this house, we are partners, nothing more, bound only by a secret journal and a commitment to justice. Grace looked from the leather-bound book to the man who was now her husband. Her mind raced. She had married a devil for money, but discovered a tormented soul trying to right generations of wrong. The shame of her mercenary intentions was replaced by a startling, unlooked-for respect. He was risking his life to dismantle the very foundation of his identity, and he had chosen her, the desperate girl, to stand by his side. She walked slowly toward the table with the oil lamp, her wedding dress trailing behind her like a discarded past. She reached out and touched the simple, worn leather of the journal, a book of truth concealed within a fortress of lies. This was not the end of her sorrow, it was the beginning of her fight. She turned and looked at David, not as her captor or her savior, but as a man who had chosen to be broken rather than corrupted. "Tell me everything," she whispered, her voice surprisingly steady, "every name, every theft. Let us begin." The wealthy bride who married for money had, on her wedding night, discovered a purpose worth more than all the gold in the world. Over the next few months, their marriage became a performance of high theater. To the outside world, Grace was the perfect trophy wife, indulging in shopping trips and hosting lavish parties, all while David played the role of the aloof, powerful husband. But in the quiet sanctity of the master suite, under the glow of the single oil lamp, they were silent conspirators. Grace, using her newfound access, studied the old financial records David had carefully hidden, memorizing names and dates from the journal, preparing the evidence that would expose Chief Arthur's entire syndicate. She discovered David's meticulous, decade-long plan to return every stolen acre of land and set up scholarship funds for the children of the families his father had ruined. The scale of his self-imposed penance was staggering, and with every detail she uncovered, the last remnants of her mercenary shame crumbled away, replaced by a deep, quiet admiration. The inevitable confrontation came at one of David's business family dinners. His uncle, Benjamin, a man whose eyes held the cold cunning of a predator, cornered Grace by the drinks table. "Tell me, Mrs. David," he sneered, his voice oily and low. "Does my nephew truly trust you with the delicate affairs of the family? He has become rather reckless." Grace did not flinch. She remembered David's warning, "They will test you with fear and greed." She smiled the brittle, empty smile of the new wealthy, her hand flashing the massive diamond ring David had given her. "The only delicate affairs my husband trusts me with, uncle," she purred, "are the ones that involve the family jewels and the next charity gala. Business, as you know, is for men." Her words, perfectly timed and executed, reinforced the family's narrative. She was a gold digger, shallow and harmless, preoccupied only with luxury. Benjamin laughed, a sharp, unpleasant sound, satisfied that the new bride was exactly what she appeared to be. The lie had worked. The final phase of the plan was set into motion when David's mother, sensing a change in her son's behavior, demanded full control of the Arthur Family Foundation's accounts which were critical to David's restitution plan. This was the opening they had waited for. Grace, acting the part of the devoted, concerned wife, accidentally left a coded ledger, one she and David had painstakingly fabricated, in an easily accessible desk drawer. The ledger was designed to implicate Benjamin in a small, recent embezzlement of his own, making it look as though David was moving to expose him. The family, always prioritizing their own survival and wealth, turned on Benjamin immediately. In the ensuing chaos, David was able to slip past the noise and execute the final, definitive legal maneuvers, transferring the entire bulk of the ill-gotten wealth into a trust for restitution, completely outside the family's reach, citing the discovery of Benjamin's financial malfeasance as the reason for the protective action. The morning after the transfers were complete, the truth was no longer a secret. David's family erupted, but the law was on his side. The evidence he had been gathering for years, combined with the protected transfers, made his position untouchable. He stood against their venomous accusations and defended his decision, accepting his new role as the pariah of the family with quiet dignity. Later that day, back in the quiet master suite, David did not kneel. He stood before Grace, a profound sense of peace on his face. He held out the marriage certificate. The debt is paid, Grace. The truth is free. And so are you. He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw not the terror of a cornered man, but the genuine affection of a man redeemed. I married you for necessity. But now I see you for the courage you possess. You are free to walk away, to keep the money I gave your family, and to find the love you truly deserve. Grace looked from the certificate to David's honest, open face. She had sought salvation in gold and found it in justice. She reached out, not for the certificate, but for David's hand, and held it firmly. I married a man for money, she said, her voice clear and without a hint of fear. But I discovered a hero. I've already found the love I deserve, David. It's the love of a cause greater than myself. And I choose to stay. The wealth was gone, replaced by a shared mission, and as the sun set over the wealthy estate, they were no longer a transactional couple, but partners, looking forward to a life of quiet, meaningful service. Grace never wore the diamond ring again. But 5 years later, standing with David at the opening of the 100th community library they funded, built on land rightfully returned, she knew she had chosen correctly. She had chosen with her whole heart, the path she initially thought she had sacrificed. This is the enduring truth, not because of the wealth they rebuilt through ethical business, but because she chose character over cash, purpose over prestige, and light over the shadows of desperation. This isn't just a story about a wedding night, it's a story about the alchemy of intention. And a heart that chooses love in the service of justice will always be a heart that leads you to your true home. If this story moved you, hit like, share it, and tell me in the comments, what is the highest price you would pay for a clean conscience? Subscribe to Stories by the King, where every story carries a heartbeat, and every choice carries a lesson. This is Stories by the King, where love wins, and purpose finds its home.